beneath the world of the living, in a realm untouched by the sun's warmth, lay an empire of silence. Buried under stone and shadow, time had long since turned flesh to dust and powerful kings into faint memories. But here, in the deepest, most forgotten vault of the catacombs, where bones were piled like pale, silent waves, something stirred. A single, defiant spark of light flickered to life within the hollow sockets of a skull, one still adorned with a crown of rusted gold. Dust, settled over a millennium, cascaded from its jaw as the once-forgotten monarch drew his first breath in 1,000 years, though no lungs remained to draw it. The Bone King had awakened. He rose with a slow, deliberate grace, the sound of his own bones creaking, echoing like distant rolling thunder. His armor, blackened by centuries and etched with ancient sigils of death, began to shimmer faintly as forgotten magic rekindled within it. His cloak, a tattered masterpiece woven from shadow and rot itself, flowed behind him like a gathering storm, alive with dark energy. As he stood, the silence of the tomb was broken. Around him the dead began to move. Skeletons, once his loyal and fearsome warriors, turned their empty, vacant eyes toward their master. A symphony of rattling bones began to fill the chamber as skulls rolled from massive heaps and skeletal hands, caked in grime and dust, lifted ancient swords from their resting places. The oppressive silence was finally shattered, replaced by the chilling whisper of death reborn. "Rise!" The king spoke, his voice not a sound of the living, but a hiss of wind blowing through grave dust. "Rise, my children of bone and oath." And they rose, not in dozens or hundreds, but in the thousands. An endless legion, their forms stretching into the oppressive darkness of the catacombs, their loyalty absolute, their purpose singular. For a long moment, the Bone King stood still, gazing upon this silent, endless sea of his resurrected army. He remembered. He remembered who he had been. King Varathorn the Eternal, a conqueror of vast realms, a ruler whose name once inspired both awe and terror. And he remembered the betrayal. Those he had trusted most, his closest confidants and allies, had conspired against him. The living had plotted to destroy him utterly, binding his soul to his decaying corpse and sealing his entire army beneath the earth, hoping to erase him from history. But even the most powerful curses decay. The strongest seals eventually weaken with the passage of eons. And some things, like a thirst for vengeance, endure forever. With each determined step Varathorn took, the torches lining the ancient walls of his tomb flared to life, one after another, ignited by a magic far older than the world of men above. The catacombs themselves seemed to shudder, trembling in anticipation as he ascended through the winding tunnels that had served as his prison. The air filled with the rhythmic clatter of bones against chains, a percussive march of the dead. His army followed, a silent, endless river of bone and steel flowing up from the depths. Finally, he reached the Gate of Skulls, a massive, imposing door carved with the tormented faces of those very men who had betrayed him. Their stone eyes, once symbols of their power, now wept trails of black dust as their cursed king approached. He raised a single, skeletal hand, and ancient runes of power flared with a blinding light upon the gate's surface. The heavy metal groaned in protest, and then, with a sound like thunder cracking the very foundations of the world, the seals shattered into nothingness. Above them, the night awaited. The moon hung cold and pale in the sky, casting its ghostly light over a land he no longer recognized. The vibrant kingdom that had buried him was now just a shadow of its former self, a realm broken and fractured by greed, ruled by weak men who had forgotten the strength and honor of their ancestors. Bustling cities now rose where sacred battlefields once lay. Holy temples had been desecrated, turned into common markets. The very concept of honor, The code he had lived and died by had turned to ash. Varathorn stepped out into the crisp night air, the moonlight glinting off his polished bones, his dark cloak rippling in the wind like a living entity. Behind him, his legion emerged from the earth, an ocean of white bone, a terrifying, beautiful sight gleaming beneath the cold light of the stars. He raised a hand toward the distant horizon, a gesture of both command and promise. "Do you feel it, my brothers?" he whispered, his voice carrying on the wind. "The world has forgotten death. Let us remind them." In response, the undead army roared. Not a sound made with vocal cords, but a deep, earth-shaking tremor as 1,000 skeletal feet struck the ground in perfect, terrifying unison. They marched. Small villages and unsuspecting farmsteads were the first to fall. Farmers, merchants, even local soldiers fled in blind panic before the silent tide of skeletons that swept across the land like a blizzard of death. No blood was spilled, for there was none left to spill in this army of the dead. Only a profound, unnerving silence followed wherever the Bone King passed, a silence that was more terrifying than any scream. Yet, not all feared him. In the towering citadel of Eldara, the last descendant of Varathorn's betrayers watched the horizon burn with an unnatural cold light. Queen Lyra, proud, defiant, and brave, knew the ancient stories. The legends of the cursed king buried deep beneath the mountains, and the vow that one day he would return to claim his due. She was not one to tremble before a ghost story. She ordered her knights to gather, her mages to prepare the ancient wards of protection. She would not let her city fall to a myth. When the Bone King and his legion finally reached the towering gates of Eldara, the entire city trembled as if in the grip of an earthquake. The queen stood resolute atop the highest wall, her silver armor gleaming in the torchlight, her eyes blazing with fierce courage. "You are a relic," she called down, her voice clear and strong. "A ghost from a forgotten age. The dead belong to the past. Return to your tomb and find the peace you were denied." Varathorn's skull tilted almost imperceptibly, the faintest echo of amusement in his hollow, ethereal voice. "Peace!" he rasped. "Peace was denied me by your bloodline. I do not seek peace. I seek only balance." "Balance?" the queen spat back, her defiance unwavering. "You bring only ruin and death." The Bone King slowly lifted his sword, a magnificent relic of obsidian and gold, once a symbol of his benevolent kingship, now a chilling beacon of despair. The very air around them grew heavy, cold, and thick with dread. "Then let the world be weighed," he said, his voice a final judgment. The battle that followed was like nothing the world had ever seen. It was a clash of fundamental forces, fire against shadow, vibrant life against cold decay. The mages of Eldara conjured raging storms of magical flame, yet the Bone King's skeletal army would not burn, marching through the inferno unscathed. The knights of the citadel fought with legendary valor, their blades sharp and their spirits high, but their efforts were tragically futile. For every fallen warrior on their side, another combatant rose from the ground to join the endless ranks of the dead. Seeing her defenses crumble, Queen Lyra descended from the walls into the chaos of the main courtyard. She wielded her ancestor S-Blade, the very same sword that had once struck Varathorn down in his mortal life. She fought with the fury of a cornered lioness, her every movement a dance of deadly grace, striking blow after blow, shattering bones and scattering the undead like dry leaves in a storm. At last, through the maelstrom of combat, she came face to face with the Bone King himself. Their swords met with a sound that cracked the night sky, sending sparks of golden light and black shadow flying in all directions. With a final, desperate surge of strength, she drove her blade deep into his ribs, right where a human heart might once have been. But he did not fall. He did not even flinch. Instead, he placed his skeletal hand gently upon the blade embedded in his chest, his hollow eyes burning brighter than ever before. "You have her courage," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, "and her curse." Lyra's eyes widened in horror as she felt cold, dark shadows crawl up her arm from the sword, the hilt turning to ice in her grasp. She tried to pull away, to let go, but the darkness had already claimed her, seeping into her very soul. Varathorn slowly withdrew the sword from his own body, allowing the queen to fall gently to the stone ground. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the conquering king knelt. He looked down at the last of his betrayer's line. "You are free," he murmured, the words almost lost to the wind. "The debt is paid." He turned his gaze to the east, where the first pale fingers of dawn were beginning to touch the horizon, painting the world in shades of grey and pink. His vast army stood silent, motionless, awaiting his next command. But the Bone King said nothing more. His war was over. The ancient magic that had bound him to his undeath, fueled by his singular quest for vengeance, began to unravel. One by one, the skeletons of his mighty army crumbled into piles of inert dust. The obsidian sword fell from his grasp, clattering onto the ground. As the first rays of sunlight finally reached him, his own bones began to fracture, glowing with a soft, fading light from within. The curse was lifted. His long watch was ended. By sunrise, all that remained in the ravaged courtyard of Eldara was a single, rusted gold crown, half buried in the ashes of a forgotten war. And though centuries would pass and the story of the Bone King would fade from history into myth, it is said that the earth beneath Eldara would always tremble faintly at night, as if the dead still listened ever vigilant for their master's call. The rain fell. It fell upon the ancient cloister of St. Remigius, a relentless percussive drumming that seemed to wash years of dust from the old stones, revealing the scars and stories etched beneath. In the heart of this deluge stood a solitary figure, Brother Aldrin. His fingers, calloused not just by prayer, but by a life lived long before these sacred walls, traced the smooth, worn beads of his rosary. His lips moved, but the words were lost to the storm, a silent penance offered to a sky that wept with him. He hadn't always been a man of God. Once he was simply Aldrin, Sir Aldrin, a knight whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and terror. His armor, once gleaming silver, had been perpetually stained crimson. His blade, a masterwork of forged steel, had spilled more blood than this torrential rain could ever hope to cleanse. He was a force of nature on the battlefield, a storm of righteous fury for his king, leaving a wake of widows and orphans. Each victory, each felled foe, was a cheer in the mead halls and another stone upon his soul. Eventually, the weight became too much. It wasn't a sudden crack, but a slow, grinding pressure that crushed his spirit. The cheers of victory were drowned out by the silent screams of the dying. The glory of his station felt like a shroud. He could no longer lift his sword without feeling the phantom weight of every life it had taken, and so he sought sanctuary. He traded his steel plate for rough-spun wool, his warhorse for a life of quiet contemplation. He laid down his sword and picked up a rosary, hoping the church could offer what the world could not: forgiveness. But redemption, he was learning, is a currency not so easily earned. It is a steep, treacherous path, and his past was a shadow that clung to him, long and deep. The faces of the slain, once blurred in the heat of battle, now visited him with haunting clarity. A young boy, no older than his own squire, whose eyes held a look of shocked betrayal. A grizzled warrior, a father perhaps, who had fought to his last breath for a cause Aldrin no longer remembered. They were his unwelcome congregation, in the quiet of his cell, their spectral forms kneeling beside him as he prayed, their unheard voices mocking his pleas for peace. Every drop of rain that struck the cold stone of the cloister felt like a drop of warm blood on his hands, a chilling, constant reminder. He had washed his hands in the holy font, but the stain remained, etched into his very being. The monastery offered sanctuary from the world, but it offered no refuge from himself. Tonight, the storm was different. It was fiercer, more personal, as if the heavens themselves were passing judgment. The wind howled through the arched walkways, a mournful cry that echoed the turmoil in his soul. Aldrin retreated from the rain-swept courtyard, his simple sandals slapping against the wet flagstones, and made his way to the scriptorium, the library of God, filled with holy words and blessed silence. He needed the comfort of parchment and ink, the steady, rhythmic scratch of a quill. He lit a single lantern, its flame a fragile beacon of gold in the vast, encroaching darkness. The flame danced and flickered, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed and twisted on the walls, turning the rows of silent manuscripts into a legion of watching specters. He sat at a heavy oak desk, the scent of old paper and beeswax filling the air. He tried to focus on the text before him, a passage from the Psalms, words that had comforted men for 1,000 years. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want..." But the words blurred. The rain hammered against the stained glass windows, and the wind moaned like a dying man. Then, through the cacophony of the storm, another sound. A whisper. It was faint at first, easily mistaken for a trick of the wind. But it came again, closer this time, slithering through the air, coiling around the pillars of the scriptorium. It was a voice that was both strange and terrifyingly familiar. "You can repent, Aldrin." He froze, his hand still resting on the holy scripture. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The voice was not in his head. It was in the room with him. It was a low, sibilant whisper, laced with a chilling amusement, echoing from the darkest corners of the cavernous hall. "But you cannot hide." Aldrin's head snapped up, his eyes wide, scanning the oppressive darkness beyond the lantern's reach. He saw nothing but shifting shadows and the glint of gilded letters on the spines of ancient books. He was alone. He had to be. This was a place of God, a fortress of faith. Evil could not simply walk through its gates. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice a hoarse croak, betraying the fear he tried so desperately to suppress. "Show yourself." The only answer was the relentless drumming of the rain and the howl of the wind. A gust of air, colder than the grave, snaked through the scriptorium, causing the lantern flame to gutter wildly. For a heart-stopping moment, the room was plunged into near total darkness. When the flame steadied, a figure was standing by the far wall, half shrouded in shadow. It was a man, or the shape of a man, clad in what looked like dark, wet leather. Rainwater dripped from the hem of his cloak, forming a small, dark puddle on the stone floor. His face was obscured by the deep shadow of a hood, but Aldrin could feel the intensity of his gaze, a physical pressure. "You have a debt to pay, Sir Knight," the voice whispered again, and this time Aldrin recognized it. It was the voice of a man he had left for dead on the fields of Oakhaven, a rival lord whose lands he had seized for his king, a man named Valerius. "Valerius?" Aldrin breathed, disbelief warring with terror. You are dead. I saw you fall." A low, mirthless chuckle emanated from beneath the hood. "Death is not always an end, Aldrin. Sometimes it is a new beginning. While you have been hiding in your stone box, whispering pleas to a silent god, I have been busy. I have found a new master, one who is far more generous with his power than yours." The figure took a step forward into the faint light. The face that emerged from the shadows was pale and gaunt, the skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. But the eyes burned with an unnatural, cold light. They were not the eyes of a living man. "Your sins follow you, Aldrin," Valerius hissed, his lips twisting into a cruel smile. "They are a scent on the wind. My master was drawn to it. drawn to you. He loves a soul so thoroughly stained, so ripe for the taking. Aldrin pushed himself back from the desk, his chair scraping loudly against the stone. He clutched the rosary in his hand, the smooth beads a desperate anchor in a sea of terror. This is a holy place. You have no power here. Valerius laughed again, a sound like grinding stone. Holy place? This is just a building, stone and wood. Your faith is the only wall that matters, and yours, my friend, is riddled with cracks. Every face you see in your nightmares, every drop of blood you feel on your hands, those are the cracks I will use to tear it all down. He took another step and another, his movements unnaturally fluid, like a predator stalking its cornered prey. You prayed for redemption, Valerius sneered, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I am here to offer you a different path, a faster one. No more sleepless nights, no more guilt. All you have to do is renounce the God who has forsaken you and embrace the one who has sought you out. Aldrin's mind reeled. This was not a man. This was a phantom, a demon wearing the face of his past. A test. It had to be a test of his faith, more terrible than any he had ever imagined. He had faced down armies, but this was a battle for his very soul. He raised the rosary, holding it before him like a shield. Get back, fiend! In the name of God I command you. Valerius halted, his smile widening. The name of God? The God who let me die in the mud while you rode away to glory? The God who now lets you rot in this monastery, drowning in your own guilt? He is not here, Aldrin. It is just you and me, and all the ghosts you brought with you. As he spoke, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, to coalesce. From the darkness, faint, shimmering forms began to appear. The young boy from the battlefield, the grizzled warrior, dozens of them, their eyes hollow, their spectral hands reaching, their silent accusations screaming in the sudden oppressive quiet of the scriptorium. The storm outside seemed to hold its breath, Aldrin's own breath hitched in his throat. His prayers, his penance, his years of self-flagellation. They hadn't banished his demons. They had just been waiting for an invitation to step out of the shadows. And Valerius had just opened the door. The penitent's secret was no longer his alone. It now filled the room, a tangible force of despair and accusation, and in the center of it all stood the ghost of his sins, offering him a final terrible choice, repentance or damnation. In the shadow of a world long past, where the bones of an ancient cathedral pierce the sky, a solitary figure moves. Here, sunlight doesn't just illuminate, it remembers, filtering through cracked stone and shattered stained glass, painting the dust motes in hues of forgotten glory. This is the domain of the Gardener of the Forgotten, a place where time itself seems to hold its breath. He tends his eternal field, a silent sentinel amidst the ruins. His own bones, polished by ages, gleam like ivory beneath a robe weathered by sun and sorrow. He is a part of this place, as much as the crumbling arches and the ivy that clings to the walls. He is a paradox, a being of death who cultivates life. From his skeletal hands, where flesh has long since surrendered, bloom flowers of the purest white. They are fragile, ethereal things, born not from soil and seed, but from the very essence of decay's embrace. Each delicate petal, soft as a sigh, cradles the soul of someone who once knelt in prayer upon these very stones. Their whispers, long silenced to the mortal ear, live on here as soft and persistent as the morning mist that clings to the broken columns. He listens to them, not with ears, but with his entire being. He feels their hopes, their fears, their final fervent wishes. These flowers are their legacy, their final prayer given form. The gardener does not speak. His voice was a price paid long ago, a willing sacrifice for a promise of peace, not for himself, but for the souls he tends. He traded sound for solace, his words for their tranquility. Yet his silence is not empty. It sings a profound and resonant hymn. It's a song of endings gracefully turning into new beginnings, a melody of profound sorrow being patiently nurtured into a quiet, enduring grace. He moves with a purpose that transcends time. With each step, his bony feet tread softly on the hallowed ground. He finds a patch of rubble, a place where despair once settled like a shroud, and he kneels. From the hollow of his palm, he coaxes another bloom into existence. It unfurls slowly, a star of white against the grey stone, a testament to resilience. This is his sacred work, planting beauty where decay once ruled with an iron fist. Think of it. In a place defined by its end, life finds its most stubborn root. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and old stone, is now sweetened with the fragrance of these soul blossoms. It's a perfume of remembrance, of love that outlasts the heart that held it, of faith that outlives the temple built in its name. The gardener is a keeper of stories, the librarian of lost voices. He ensures that no prayer is ever truly lost, no soul is ever truly forgotten. His garden is not one of neat rows and manicured hedges. It is wild, chaotic, and breathtakingly beautiful. Flowers push up through cracks in the flagstones. They drape themselves over fallen statues, and they cluster in the empty eye sockets of stone gargoyles, as if to give them a new kind of sight. It is a living tapestry, woven from the threads of memory and mortality. Each bloom is a pinpoint of light in the encroaching darkness, a quiet rebellion against oblivion. As the sun arcs across the sky, its light shifts, and the shadows within the cathedral lengthen and dance. The gardener continues his ceaseless vigil. He is not bound by the rising and setting of the sun, for his work is eternal. He is a constant in a world of variables, a point of stillness in the relentless flow of history. He is the quiet answer to the loud question of what comes after. His existence is a gentle, powerful lesson. He reminds us that even death is not an absolute end. It is a transformation, a change of state. He shows us through his silent, diligent work that life, in its most essential form, never truly dies. It simply changes its song, alters its shape, and finds new ground in which to bloom. The gardener of the forgotten walks on, a skeletal figure of hope, planting stars in the dust of yesterday, ensuring that even in the deepest silence, a beautiful story continues to be told. Once he had a name. It was whispered in halls of sunlit stone and sung in lullabies under a younger moon. But names are fragile things, easily lost to the relentless tide of time. Now centuries of dust have settled over that memory, leaving only a title, a purpose. Now he is simply the keeper. His domain is the Garden of Rest, a quiet, sprawling expanse where silence is the only language spoken and every shadow holds a story. This is not a garden of vibrant life as the living know it. There are no buzzing bees or birdsong heralding the dawn. Instead, it is a realm of profound stillness, a sanctuary for echoes. Each dawn, as the first pale light spills over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of lavender and old gold, the keeper rises. He moves among the tombs, his steps as silent as the falling leaves of an autumn that never ends. His purpose is singular, sacred. He is here to gather the blossoms. These are no ordinary flowers. They do not sprout from soil rich with rain and sun. They grow from the ashes of the lost, from the very essence of souls who have journeyed beyond the veil. Each one is a memory made manifest, a life distilled into petals and stem. He approaches each bloom with a reverence born of ages. His touch is gentle, a whisper against the delicate structure. He knows that within each flower, a heartbeat once pulsed. Within each stem, a symphony of forgotten laughter and quiet tears still hums. He gathers them one by one, his basket woven from moonlight and willow branches slowly filling with these spectral blooms. With each one he plucks, he murmurs his thanks. He speaks in the language of bones, a tongue of clicks and sighs that only the departed understand. It is a language of gratitude, of acknowledgement. He thanks them for their stories, for the brief, brilliant flicker of their existence that now contributes to the garden's ethereal beauty. The garden is vast, a labyrinth of headstones and mausoleums that stretch as far as the eye can see. Some are grand, carved with intricate reliefs of forgotten gods and epic battles. Others are simple, weathered stones, their inscriptions worn away by the patient caress of time. But to the keeper, they are all the same. They are anchors for the souls that rest here, silent monuments to lives lived and loves lost. He has walked these paths for so long that he knows every crack in the stone, every twist of the ivy that clings to the marble. Today, however, feels different. There is a strange quality to the light, a sense of anticipation in the air that prickles at the edges of his ancient consciousness. He has gathered countless blossoms today, their spectral colors a riot against the gray stone of the tombs. There are the deep indigos of scholars who spent their lives chasing knowledge, the fiery reds of warriors who fell in battle, the soft pale pinks of young lovers whose time was cut short. Each one is a universe of experience, a complete story held within its fragile form. He has been the guardian of this place for longer than mortal minds can comprehend. He has seen civilizations rise and fall like the turning of a page. He has watched stars be born and die in the cosmic ocean above. Through it all, his task has remained the same, to tend the garden, to honor the memories. It is a solitary existence, but he has never felt lonely. The whispers of the past are his constant companions, the silent chorus of a million lives his daily symphony. He has watched the garden slowly fade. For centuries, new blossoms appeared with every dawn, a testament to the endless cycle of life and passing. But the arrivals have grown fewer and farther between. The world beyond the garden's gates has grown quiet, its wellspring of souls running dry. The once thriving fields of memory flowers have thinned, leaving patches of barren dust where vibrant colors once bloomed. He knew this day would come. It was foretold in the patterns of the stars and the whispers of the wind. Now, his journey through the garden brings him to a small, secluded corner, a place he has not visited in a very long time. It is a humble plot, marked by a single unadorned stone, and there, growing from the dust before it, is one final flower. It is the last one, the very last blossom in this fading realm. It glows with an internal light, a luminescence that seems to contain all the colors of every flower he has ever gathered. It is a kaleidoscope of existence, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic light. The keeper stops. He lowers his basket, his ancient joints creaking a soft protest. He has known this moment was coming, has prepared for it for eons, yet its arrival still brings a profound sense of finality. He kneels before the flower, his old, weathered hands hovering over its petals. It is more beautiful than any he has ever seen. It radiates a warmth that pushes back the perpetual twilight of the garden. In its light, he can almost see faces, hear voices, a collage of every soul that has ever rested here. For a long moment, he simply watches it, this final testament to life. He remembers the first flower he ever gathered, a simple white bloom that smelled of sea salt and regret. He remembers the millions that followed, each unique, each precious. He has been the archivist of endings, the chronicler of goodbyes. His purpose was to ensure that no one was truly forgotten, that every life, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, left its mark. With a tenderness that belies his immense age, he reaches out. His fingers, as gnarled as ancient tree roots, close around the stem. He doesn't pluck it. He simply lifts it, holding it up to the pale, ethereal light of the garden's sky. It feels not like a flower, but like a star held in his hand, a condensed nebula of dreams and memories. As he holds it aloft, a wind begins to stir. It is the first wind to blow through the Garden of Rest in 1,000 years. It starts as a gentle sigh, rustling the dry leaves that have lain undisturbed for centuries. Then it grows stronger, a current of energy that flows from the edges of the realm, converging on the final flower. The wind whispers through the tombs, carrying with it the faint echoes of names, of songs, of last words. The flower in his hand begins to tremble. The light within it intensifies, becoming almost blinding. Then, with a soft, musical chime, the petals begin to break away. They do not fall to the ground. Instead, they scatter, caught by the swirling wind. Each petal transforms as it flies, becoming a shimmering mote of light, a pure spark of soul. One by one, they are lifted into the sky. The deep indigos, the fiery reds, the soft pinks, and 1,000 other shades he has known and tended. They ascend, a spiraling river of light, carrying the collected memories of an entire world into the heavens. They are no longer bound to the garden, no longer echoes tied to dust and stone. They are free. The keeper watches them go, his head tilted back. The torrent of souls paints the sky, a breathtaking aurora of farewell. He sees the warrior reunited with his honor, the scholar finding his final answer, the lovers finally embracing in an eternity of light. He sees joy, peace, and release. He sees completion. He stands there until the last spark of light has vanished, until the sky has returned to its familiar, pearlescent gray. The wind dies down, and a profound, absolute silence descends upon the garden. It is not the somber silence of before, but a clean, empty silence, a silence of a slate wiped clean. The stem in his hand is now bare, the garden is empty. The tombs stand as hollow monuments, their purpose fulfilled, his purpose fulfilled. And the keeper, the guardian of a garden that is no more, looks upon the empty expanse. A slow, gentle smile spreads across his ancient face. It is a smile of contentment, of peace, of a job well done. His long watch is over. His task, at last, is complete. He can finally rest. In the Valley of Skulls, where no bird dared to sing and the very air was a shroud of silence, the Lord of Bones stood amidst his endless congregation. He wasn't always this spectre of dread. Once, he was known as a sage, a guardian of life, a protector of the vibrant pulse of the world. His hands, which now commanded legions of the fallen, had once nurtured the earth and healed the sick. But a great tragedy, a shadow that consumed all he held dear, pushed him to the edge of despair. In his grief, he sought a power beyond the mortal realm, a force that could defy the finality of death itself. He made the forbidden pact, a covenant whispered in the forgotten corners of existence, trading his own vibrant life for dominion over the departed. Now clad in obsidian armor that seemed to drink the meager light, and crowned with the very essence of decay, he was a different being entirely. The Lord of Bones. His kingdom was this desolate valley, his subjects the silent skeletal remains of countless souls. Each one, in their former lives, had sworn an oath of loyalty to him, to the principles he once championed. They were his knights, his scholars, his people. They had pledged their fealty in life, and now, bound by the eternal covenant, that oath endured even in death. It was a bond that transcended the veil, a promise that not even the grave could break. With a slow, deliberate motion of his bony hand, a gesture both sorrowful and commanding, he summoned their essence. From the hollow sockets of the skulls, from the dust of ages, shimmering embers of lost spirits began to rise. They swirled around him, a galaxy of faint, ethereal lights, like a storm of captive fireflies. Each ember was a memory, a flicker of a life once lived, a soul awaiting its master's call. The silence of the valley was finally broken by a voice that was both a whisper and a thunderclap, a sound that resonated not in the ears, but in the very soul. "Rest no longer," he intoned, the words echoing with the weight of forgotten centuries. He continued, his voice a tapestry of ancient sorrow and unyielding resolve. "You, who followed me in the sunlit world, who trusted my guidance and shared my dream of a world without loss. That dream was stolen from us. We were cast into this oblivion, forgotten by the living, dismissed as mere echoes of the past. But the covenant we made was not of flesh, but of spirit. It is eternal. The world above has forgotten justice. It has forgotten sacrifice. It has forgotten us." As he spoke, the embers burned brighter, their collective light pushing back the oppressive darkness of the valley. A low hum began to fill the air, the sound of a million dormant wills stirring from their long slumber. "They believe us to be gone," a cautionary tale whispered to frightened children. "They revel in a world built upon our ashes, ignorant of the price we paid. But our pledge endures, our purpose remains." The Lord of Bones raised his other hand, and the ground began to tremble. Not with a violent quake, but with a deep, rhythmic pulse, like a colossal heart beginning to beat anew. Skeletons began to stir, bone grating against bone as they pushed themselves up from the dusty earth. Ancient armor, tarnished but unbroken, settled back onto skeletal frames. Tattered banners bearing the sigil of their long-dead kingdom were lifted by fleshless hands. "Our kingdom shall breathe again," he declared, his voice rising to a crescendo of absolute authority. The spectral embers dove downwards, plunging into the skeletal forms that now stood at attention. A cold blue light ignited within their empty eye sockets, a sign of their reawakened consciousness. The silent congregation was silent no more. They were an army, bound by an unbreakable oath, led by a master who had sacrificed everything to command them. The Valley of Skulls was no longer a graveyard. It was the heart of a resurgent empire, a testament to a promise that death itself could not erase. And the dead obeyed. In perfect unison, a legion of skeletons turned their gaze towards the mouth of the valley, towards the distant living world. They stood as one, a silent, disciplined force awaiting their first command in 1,000 years. The Lord of Bones looked upon his reborn army, a flicker of something ancient and sad in his own glowing eyes. Was it regret for the life he had lost? Or was it the grim satisfaction of a promise about to be fulfilled? Perhaps it was both. He had defied the natural order, all for the sake of his people, all for the sake of their eternal covenant. The world of the living was about to be reminded of the oaths they had forgotten, and the power of a king who refused to let his kingdom die. The age of bone had begun. Have you ever heard a silence so deep it feels like the world is holding its breath? That's the kind of silence that falls over the northern mountains, the frozen veil, just before the whispers begin. Whispers of a name that chills the blood more than any winter frost, Varkul the Dreaded. They say that when the moon hangs in the sky like a drop of blood, he rides. Once Varkul was a man, a warlord whose ambition was as vast and unforgiving as the northern wastes themselves. His armies were a plague upon the land, conquering clan after clan, his banner a symbol of inevitable doom. But Varkul's pride knew no bounds. He believed himself greater than men, greater even than the ancient gods who watched from their celestial thrones. In his arrogance, he led his warriors into the sacred groves, the hallowed grounds where the gods' own beasts roamed free. These were not mere animals. They were living embodiments of nature's raw power. the great horned stags whose antlers brushed the clouds, the silver-furred bears whose roar could shake the mountains to their core. For Vakul, they were just another conquest, another trophy to prove his might. He hunted them, slaughtered them, and defiled their sacred lands, laughing as his axes fell. The gods, in their fury, did not strike him down. No, they crafted a punishment far more cruel. They cursed him not with death, but with an eternity of cold, unfeeling life. His skin, once warmed by blood and ambition, hardened into stone, grey and cracked like the mountain cliffs. His heart, once a forge of rage, became a lump of ice. And his eyes, they say his eyes now burn with the last embers of his humanity, a constant, agonizing fire in a frozen shell. He was no longer a man, but a monument to his own sacrilege. Vakul, the dreaded, was born. And he does not ride alone. At his side lopes a beast as monstrous as his own cursed form, Grath, a wolf of impossible size, with fur the color of a winter storm and teeth like shards of obsidian. Some legends say Grath was the alpha of the divine pack Vakul slew, its spirit bound to his tormentor in a twisted parody of loyalty. Together, they are an inseparable nightmare, a single entity of vengeance and sorrow, haunting the lands Vakul once sought to conquer. Now imagine you're huddled in a small village, nestled deep within the snow-draped pines. The fire crackles low, and the wind howls a mournful song against your wooden walls. Suddenly, the dogs fall silent. The very air grows heavy, thick with a primal fear. You don't hear footsteps, you don't see a shadow, you only hear a low, guttural growl that seems to come from everywhere at once, carried on the wind itself. It's the echo of Grath, and it means Vakul is near. When morning comes, the neighboring village is simply gone, vanished. No signs of a struggle, no bodies, no blood staining the snow. The homes stand empty, their hearths cold. The only evidence that people ever lived there is the faint, chilling echo of that growl, and a profound, unnatural stillness. The snow remains pristine, unmarred by tracks of man or beast. It's as if the entire village was plucked from existence, swallowed whole by the frozen night. This is Vakul's curse and his new eternal war. He is the spirit of the unforgiving winter, the embodiment of a silent, creeping dread. The clans of the north don't build walls to keep him out. They know walls are useless. Instead, they tell stories. They pass down the legends, not just to frighten their children, but as a genuine warning. They speak of the priestess, the one who called down the god's wrath upon Vakul. Her name was Lyra. She was the last guardian of the sacred groves, and it was her desperate prayer that sealed Vakul's fate. The gods, in their terrible wisdom, bound his curse to her bloodline. Now, centuries later, the legend has a terrifying new chapter. The whispers say Vakul is not just wandering aimlessly. He is hunting. He seeks the last living descendant of the very priestess who cursed him. And here, the story splits, like a path through the dark woods. No one knows for certain what he wants with her. Some elders believe he seeks to break the curse. They say that by shedding the blood of Lyra as heir upon the same sacred ground he once defiled, he might finally be released from his stone prison and granted the peace of true death. A final, desperate act of violence to undo the first. But others whisper of something far darker. They fear he doesn't want to end his torment at all. They believe his frozen heart has conceived a new, more sinister ambition. He wants to find the last of Lyra's line, not to kill her, but to claim her, to drag her soul into the frost with him, to make her his queen in his desolate, silent kingdom of ice. To ensure that the one who cursed him shares his eternity of damnation, forever bound to the monster her ancestor created. Think of that. An endless winter, with a stone-skinned king and an unwilling queen riding through the silent, empty valleys for all time. It's a fate worse than any quick death his axes could have delivered. Every generation, the northern clans watch their young women, looking for the sign, a certain strength in their spirit, a deep connection to the old ways, an echo of Lyra's power in their eyes. Is it a gift or a death sentence to be the one person in the world who holds the key to Vakul's future, whether it be his end or his eternal triumph? The story of Vakul the Dreaded is more than just a ghost story told around a fire. It's a living part of the frozen Vale. It's in the howl of the wind, the heavy silence of a snowfall, and the deep instinctual fear of what walks in the night when the moon bleeds red. He is the chilling proof that some sins can never be outrun and some curses last an eternity. So, if you ever find yourself in the northern wilds and you hear a lone wolf's growl on the wind, don't look for tracks. Just pray the dawn comes quickly. Gather round and let me tell you a story that chills the very marrow in your bones. It's a tale whispered on the coldest nights, when the wind howls like a hungry beast and the world is wrapped in a shroud of white. This is the legend of the Wolf Knight, a spectre born from ambition and betrayal. Long ago, in an age of endless war, there was a warrior of unmatched skill. His name is lost to time, but his desperation is not. Facing an unwinnable battle with his people on the brink of annihilation, he sought power that no mortal should ever wield. He ventured into the shadowed corners of the world, to a place where the veil between realms is thin, and called out to the abyss. A dark spirit, ancient and hungry, answered his plea. The warrior swore an oath of fealty, pledging his eternal service in exchange for one thing: victory. The spirit kept its word. On the day of the final battle, a terrifying power surged through the warrior. He was an unstoppable storm of steel and fury, his enemies falling before him like wheat before a scythe. The victory was absolute, his people were saved, and his name was sung as a hero. But the price of such power is always steep. As the last echoes of celebration faded, the spirit returned to claim its due. It didn't want his soul, not in the way you might think. It wanted his humanity. Slowly, terrifyingly, the transformation began. His skin, once warmed by the sun, turned the color of cold ash. His heart, which once beat with courage and love for his people, blackened into a lump of obsidian. His laughter, once full of life, became a dry, rasping sound that promised only pain. The most horrifying change was the arrival of his steed. A great wolf, larger than any living creature, emerged from the abyss itself. Its fur was the color of a starless night, and its eyes burned with cold, intelligent fire. It was not a beast to be tamed. It was his jailer, his other half, bound to him for eternity. Together, they became a single entity of vengeance, the Wolf Knight of the Abyss. They were cast out, feared by the very people he had saved. They now roam the snowbound wastelands at the edge of the world, a place where the sun is a pale ghost and life struggles to exist. They are caught between worlds, neither living nor dead, their existence a constant, gnawing hunger for something they can never reclaim. But this isn't just a sad story of a fallen hero. It's a warning, for the warrior's victory was not without treachery. In his moment of greatest need, allies who had sworn to fight by his side abandoned him, leaving him to face his doom alone. He saved their people, but he never forgot their cowardice. And so, a new purpose bloomed in his frozen heart: revenge. Every winter, when the world sleeps beneath a thick blanket of ice and snow, the Wolf Knight returns. The deep winter is his season, the blizzard his cloak. He rides from the wastelands, the silent paws of his great wolf, leaving no tracks in the snow. He comes to hunt, not for sport, not for food, but for retribution. He seeks the descendants of those who betrayed him, their bloodlines a lingering stain on the world he can no longer truly be a part of. His armor is a work of grim art, forged from shadow and ice, absorbing the faint light of the winter moon. The great sword he carries is said to be a shard of frozen starlight, its edge so keen it can slice through a man's hope before it even touches his flesh. When he rides, the only sound is the whisper of the wind, and if you're close enough, the faint, rhythmic crackle of frost forming on his armor. They say you can feel his approach before you see him. The air grows unnaturally cold. Your breath plumes in thick white clouds, and a profound sense of dread settles over you, heavy as a burial shroud. The trees themselves seem to lean away from his path, their branches brittle and bare. Animals fall silent, hiding deep in their burrows, for they know a predator unlike any other is on the prowl. His presence warps the very landscape. The snow under his wolf's paws doesn't melt, it hardens into black ice. The wind that follows him carries not just cold, but whispers of forgotten sorrows and promises of future despair. He is a force of nature, an embodiment of winter's unforgiving heart. He doesn't need to ask for names or check a list. The scent of betrayal is carried in the blood, a legacy of shame passed down through generations. He can smell it, taste it on the frigid air. And then there's the laughter. It's not a sound of joy or mirth, it's an echo from the abyss, a dry, hollow cackle that rattles between the frozen trees. It's the sound of a broken heart, finding its only pleasure in the suffering of others. It's the sound of inevitable doom. The legends all agree on one chilling fact. If you are lost in a snowstorm and you hear that laughter drifting on the wind, it's already too late. It means he has found you. It means the hunt is over. There are stories from those few who claim to have survived an encounter. A lone trapper caught in a blizzard who saw two burning embers watching him from the edge of the woods and scrambled into a sacred cave just as the laughter began. A young woman descended from one of the treacherous clans who felt the cold seep into her home and heard the scratching of a massive claw at her door all night, only to find the door splintered and the snow outside turned to black glass by morning. These aren't tales of heroism. They are tales of narrow, terrified escape. They speak of an entity that is patient, relentless, and utterly without mercy. So when the winter winds begin to blow and the first snowflakes fall, remember the wolf night. Remember the price of ambition and the long memory of betrayal. Bar your doors, stoke your fires, and pray the storm that rages outside is only wind and snow. And if you hear a strange, hollow laughter carried on the gale, don't go looking for its source. You won't like what you find. In the ancient monastery of St. Elric, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking a shadowed valley, there lived a monk whom few dared to approach. His name was Brother Marlin, a figure as gaunt and silent as the stone saints carved into the chapel walls. He wasn't like the other brothers who tended the gardens or illuminated manuscripts with vibrant gold leaf. No, Brother Malin's duties were far more obscure and infinitely more chilling. He prayed at hours that defied the sun, his solitary chants echoing through the cold corridors when the world was shrouded in deep sleep. He walked the flagstone halls with a measured, almost weightless tread, a phantom in his own home, and he never, ever removed the strange obsidian pendant he wore hidden beneath the coarse fabric of his robes. The whispers among the novices said he was a confessor, but his penitents were not of the living world. They said he listened to the dead, and they were right. Every night, as the clock tower struck the solemn final chime of midnight, Brother Marlin would descend into the crypt. There, beneath the flickering, uncertain light of a single tallow lantern, he would sit on a cold stone bench and wait. The air would grow heavy, the flame would dance erratically, and then the voices would begin. They were the spirits of the damned, the souls trapped between worlds, drawn to the strange power of his pendant. They came to him one by one to whisper the sins that bound them to the earth, their ethereal voices like the rustling of dry leaves. They confessed tales of greed that had poisoned families, of betrayals that had shattered kingdoms, of jealousies that had ended in blood. They sobbed and pleaded, their spectral forms shimmering in the gloom, seeking an absolution he could never truly grant. His purpose was not to forgive, but to listen, to bear witness to their eternal torment, to be the living vessel for their unending regret. His rosary beads, carved from the wood of a lightning-struck yew, would click softly through his fingers, a rhythmic counterpoint to the spectral symphony of sorrow. He would murmur prayers for these lost souls, prayers that drifted into the damp, cold air and vanished, just like the spirits themselves at the first hint of dawn. He was their anchor, their final, futile hope for peace, a shepherd for a flock of shadows. Tonight, a storm raged with biblical fury. Rain lashed against the stained glass windows, and thunder cracked across the valley like the sky itself was breaking apart. The monastery shuddered with each concussive blast. Down in the crypt, the air was unusually electric, charged with a palpable sense of dread that went beyond the storm. The lantern flames sputtered violently, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed on the walls like tormented things. Marlon clutched his pendant, its cold surface a familiar, if unsettling, comfort against his skin. The whispers began, more frantic and desperate than usual. They swirled around him, a cacophony of spectral misery, each voice trying to scream over the others. He tried to focus, to separate one from the next, but they were a maelstrom of despair. He closed his eyes, reciting the ancient rite of listening, the words a shield against the overwhelming chaos. And then, through the tempest of ghostly wails and the roar of the actual storm outside, one voice cut through with chilling clarity. It was not a whisper. It was a clear, resonant tone, filled with an ancient power and a cold, mocking amusement. It did not speak of murder or theft or envy. It did not confess, it commanded. And as the thunder rolled in a deafening crescendo, that single, terrible voice spoke his own name. "Malen," it said, and the sound was so close it felt as if it came from within his own mind. His eyes snapped open. The crypt was empty, save for him. The cacophony of other spirits had vanished, silenced into non-existence. The only presence left was the one that had called his name. A profound, primordial cold seeped into the stone, into his very bones, a cold that had nothing to do with the rainy night. He had spent years listening to the regrets of the dead. He knew their tones, their textures, the shape of their sorrow. This was different. This was not a lost soul seeking confession. This was a predator, an ancient darkness that had been watching him, waiting. "Who are you?" Marlon's voice was a hoarse whisper, his hand trembling as it clutched the pendant. A low chuckle echoed in the chamber, seeming to emanate from the shadows themselves. "You have been a dutiful little shepherd, Marlon, listening to my lost sheep." The voice was smooth, like polished obsidian, but with an undercurrent of grinding stone. "But you have misunderstood your role entirely. You are not their confessor." A form began to coalesce in the darkness opposite him, a deeper patch of black that seemed to drink the lantern light. "You are their gatekeeper. You have been gathering them for me." Terror, cold and absolute, seized Marlon. The pendant, the prayers, the rituals, he had believed them to be a shield, a tool for penance. He now saw the horrifying truth. They were a lure, a beacon. For all these years, he had not been easing the suffering of the damned. He had been rounding them up, concentrating their spiritual energy in this one consecrated place. The obsidian pendant suddenly felt like a brand, burning his skin. It wasn't a holy relic, it was a key. "The souls you've collected," the voice continued, as the shadow grew taller, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape with too many joints and angles that were fundamentally wrong. Their despair has been a delicious appetizer, but now it is time for the main course. And your soul, little confessor, your soul, so steeped in the misery of 1,000 others, will be the most exquisite of all. The entity took a step forward, and the stone floor cracked under its unseen weight. The lantern flame was finally extinguished, plunging the crypt into absolute blackness. Brother Marlon was alone in the dark, with the one being whose sins were too great to confess, and whose hunger was now focused entirely on him. Thank you so much for journeying with me into the shadows of St. Elric's Monastery. If you enjoyed this dark tale, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel for more stories from the edge of the light. We'd love to have you in our community of story lovers. Until next time, stay curious.